We welcome you to the Priscilla R. Tyson Cultural Arts Center for our Conversations and Coffee on this 7th day of March, 2024. I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the program. We're delighted to have with us today Claudia Retter, whose photography and book art surround us here in our main gallery. And we're honored to share in her true story of flying adventures of two candy cane pen friends. Claudia will share with us the story that art tells of creative persistence. Do you get that feeling as you walk around and experience this story? Lessons from a long-term project. Claudia, I read your book, Art, Friday night at the opening, and I loved it. I'm excited to hear your talk on creative persistence. Claudia was born in Germany, grew up in New England, and now makes her home here in our beloved Columbus. She has seen the world through the eyes of an artist and storyteller ever since she opened her first book and inspired others, us, to see the stories in our own lives through her exhibits, readings, and workshops. Most recently, Claudia worked with students at the Ohio State School for the Blind through a Teach Arts Ohio grant to research the school's history and create a mixed media installation display for the main meeting space on Ohio State School for the Blind. Claudia has received numerous accolades for both her photographic work and this handmade artist book, The Flying Adventures. The awards include the Excellence Award from the Ohio Arts Council, grants from the Greater Columbus Arts Council, and awards from the Southern Vermont Art Center and Salmagundi in New York. Flying Adventures made its debut in Ohio's Springfield Museum of Art in the fall of 2019 and comes to us today, for which we are most grateful. Flying Adventures is a true story, and I'm asking Claudia to tell more of that true story, told through photographs and hand-lettered text of pen pals who finally meet and spend time exploring the Pacific Northwest in a little blue and yellow airplane. Written in the spirit of The Little Prince, remember that? The Flying Adventures, The Little Prince, celebrates the magic of friendship and flight, inspiring the dreamer in us all. Claudia, thank you for sharing your amazing dream in the Flying Adventures and your desire to motivate us to inspire the dreamer in us all. Hey, wonderful. Isn't it great that you're with us?
Winnie the Pooh said, "You can't stay in your corner of the forest waiting for others to come to you. You have to go to them sometimes."
You're good.
Once upon a time, in the here and now, a girl in Ohio and a boy in Washington spent a winter writing letters and so became friends. Ryan's pen was made of glass. "It looks like a green striped candy cane," he wrote. And so Claudia called him her candy cane pen friend. At the end of spring, they thought they might like to get together for an adventure, as Ryan had his very own airplane, a blue and yellow Luscombe Silver, perfect for adventuring, and Claudia had always loved the sky. Once she arrived in Seattle, they wasted no time getting started. Claudia and Ryan hurriedly packed blankets and pillows for camping and walked to the airport, scrambling down the hill and through the blackberry bushes to get to Ryan's plane. Ryan had made Claudia a pair of wings for Christmas, which she wore on this very special occasion. Claudia thought she might be scared, being so far up in the sky in a tiny airplane, but everything was too beautiful to be scary. They raced the sunset, landing like a cloud on Copalis Beach, which Claudia thought was just magical. What a dream come true, to land a plane on a beach, a dream she didn't even know she had. The ocean was roaring, the waves were pink, and the moon was shining in the south. They were the only people on the sand. "I'm so happy," Claudia shouted at the top of her lungs, because she was. Before it grew dark, they flew off to find a different place to sleep, for the tide would have washed the Silvair out to sea in the middle of the night. Landing at Hoquiam, not too far away, they patted the Silvair goodnight and took a barefoot walk down a little path, which opened into a field. There they heard the sound of the bay. Ryan, being a very tall boy, could see the water over the trees and offered to lift Claudia up so that she could see too. She climbed on his back, and they stayed there for a while, watching the moonlight shining on the water. They set up their tent at the edge of the field, falling asleep under old wool blankets while the bright moon watched over them all through the night. In the morning, little slugs were leaving trails on the tent mesh, going every which way. "Hello, hello," they were saying. "Good morning." There was fog in the air, but the sun was burning through. Claudia went for a walk and found a way to the water, only to discover that most of it had disappeared during the night. Posts of old piers emerged from the mud flats like skyscrapers of an abandoned city. Trunks of giant pine trees, long ago lost to the water and sun, lay on their sides like the ancient bones of sleeping dinosaurs. Claudia shouted to Ryan, who was just waking up, "Come see!" A heron flew over their heads as they explored the mud flats. It would all be underwater again as soon as the tide came back. After they had taken down the tent and packed everything away, Ryan asked Claudia if she'd like to go to breakfast at Lana's, the diner at the other end of the runway. And if so, he asked, would you like to walk, or would you prefer to take the plane? She didn't even need to think about it, grinning from ear to ear as he started the engine, propped open the window, and chauffeured her to the restaurant in the Silvair. As Claudia ate her eggs and hash browns, she looked out the window at all the usual white planes and thought, how are you supposed to tell those apart? She realized how lucky she was. I get to ride around in that beautiful blue one with the starry yellow wings and red and white striped tail. Little did she know that her favorite airplanes would always have stars on them. From Hoquiam, they flew to Sanderson Field for fuel and decided to stay a while. They lolled around in the shade under the awning and watched skydivers drift down from the clouds like little M&Ms. What should we do next? Ryan wondered out loud in a lazy, yawning sort of way, and Claudia couldn't help but say, well, I could really use a nap. I know the perfect spot, Ryan said, and so they flew north to Point Roberts, which Ryan knew had the best and most comfortable driftwood logs upon which to sleep. Once there, he found a good napping log, and Claudia, borrowing his giraffe with leg warmers beach towel, fell asleep on the shore of smoothly rounded rocks. The sun sank lower in the sky, sparkling on the water, while the rocks rolled back and forth in the waves, making a peaceful clacking sound with their coming and going. Whoosh, clack, clack, clack. When the air turned chilly, they walked into town and enjoyed a delicious dinner before heading back to the plane at sunset. The entire road smelled of lilacs. They took off in the moonlight, following it home across the San Juan Islands. On Friday, after Ryan came home from work, they thought they'd venture east this time instead of west. They flew through the mountains along the river to Skykomish. Landing on a tiny grass runway, at the edge of a forest of fragrant trees. After setting up the tent under the wing, Ryan played melodies on his ocarina while Claudia answered him from the other side of the field with songs on her recorder. They listened to the river rushing and heard the train horns echoing through the valley in the middle of the night. Though the moon kept trying, it never quite made it out of the clouds. In the morning, they walked the railroad tracks into town to look for breakfast. Claudia had had dreams about finding a cafe with a canary in the window and fresh out of the oven brioche, so she commandeered a caboose to take her there. Meanwhile, Ryan discovered a magic hat whose secret powers have yet to be revealed. You can't see it in this photo, but someone had drawn a little yellow hat on the train, and he's standing right underneath it. After breakfasting at the Cascadia, Ryan and Claudia noticed the appearance of a lady in a flowered hat. Crowds of people were filling the street. The two pen friends suddenly found themselves in the middle of a parade. It was the Skycomish Centennial celebration. Kids in costumes threw candy from floats, while cowboys rode by on horses. A troubadour with an accordion sang songs about Billy the Kid, while Smokey the Bear waved from his very own rickshaw. Ryan and Claudia spent the entire afternoon watching the festivities while listening to bluegrass music from a good spot on the sidewalk. They were sad when it was time to leave, for it had been a perfect day. Flying out over Skycomish late in the afternoon, Ryan rocked the Silver's wings in fond farewell to the tiny town. This was the view when Ryan asked Claudia if she'd like to fly the plane. They were on their way to Illapa to camp. She had to sit on 2 pillows to reach the pedals. And as if flying an airplane through a beautiful sunset wasn't enough, a pink balloon happened to float by beneath them, trailing silver ribbons. Once they landed, Ryan and Claudia went exploring, looking for a good spot to set up the tent. A trail led them over a fence toward the inlet and into a fairy world of waving trees and grassy paths. They fell asleep to the sound of peepers in the marshes. The stars were out in grand display. In the morning, Ryan went for a walk, and Claudia made photographs in her wings. When he returned, Ryan wound up in a few himself, playing his ocarina. On quiet days when Ryan was working, Claudia spent most of her time reading books. In the morning when he left, she would wave out the window as he rode away on his folding clown bike. Later, they would meet for lunch under the willow tree next to the river. Speaking of lunch, on the way to Point Roberts the week before, Claudia and Ryan had stopped in Arlington to visit Uncle Paul, Ryan's airplane mechanic and maker of magic flutes. They had promised to fly in again the following Friday with a picnic. "How did you fit all that in a luscum?" Dennis asked as they unloaded baskets and quilts and china plates and silverware and Ryan's teacups with blue flowers on them. Claudia was happy to make some new friends. It was a lovely afternoon. On the night after the full moon, Ryan had something special planned. He and Claudia took off that evening and headed straight for Mount Rainier, which looked like a ghost floating in the twilight air. "Wait till you see the moon," Ryan said, as he flew the Silver higher and higher, as high as it would go, climbing until the ground disappeared beneath them in the haze, then slowly circling the mountain top while waiting for the moon to rise. It finally appeared as a glow, pulling itself up over the bands of clouds, heavy-looking and orange like an egg yolk. After a while, when they turned for home, Claudia looked up through the skylight. There was the Big Dipper, shining so close she thought she might be able to jump right into its bowl. Where to go? Where to go? These were Ryan and Claudia's last days together, and they still had so many places they wanted to visit. How to decide? Claudia wrote down their ideas on scraps of paper, rolled them up into little balls, and tossed them onto the aeronautical chart. Whichever landed closest to Seattle would win. This turned out to be the Oregon coast, but when Ryan checked the weather, they had to toss the papers again and came up with the Olympic Peninsula. It must have been the beautiful fog clouds that were calling to them, wanting to be seen. Come visit, come visit, Claudia thought she heard them say. Should we take a closer look, Ryan asked. Yes, Claudia answered, for this was the magic of being in your own little airplane. You could swoop around to visit whatever you wanted. The magic show miracle continued as they slipped under the clouds and through the sunbursts to land in the tiny fishing village of Sikiu. Sikiu was holding their annual halibut fishing derby, and the town was filled with fishermen trying to catch the biggest fish. Claudia and Ryan set up camp under the wing. In the morning, they were awakened by a crow cawing right above their heads. Or maybe it was a fish on final approach. Ryan shouted at it to be quiet, but it didn't listen, so he and Claudia got up and walked down the hill to swing on the swings and find some breakfast. Taking a walk past the busy pier, they peered into the quiet tide pools. The water came swirling past their feet in circles. They saw purple starfish and poked their fingers gently at little anemones whose tentacles curled away. That tickles, they said. Claudia now regrets not having photographed the town's larger-than-life-size sculpture of a halibut jogging in aqua-colored shorts and track shoes. If you've been to Sikiu, you know what she's talking about. She did, however, manage to capture what she thought might be an elk. When they left Sikiu that afternoon, they flew around the tip of the Olympic Peninsula, hugging the coast and watching the moody sea clouds off to the west. It just so happened that Copalis Beach was on the way home, so they landed on the sand again, putting down the giraffe with Legwarmer's towel and watching the cloudy sun. The Silver looked out over the ocean, and Claudia wondered what it might be thinking. She thought maybe it was pondering its life, feeling happy to be landing on beaches, carrying the boy who loves it most, and the girl who knows that it was thinking these things. When the waves began coming closer, it was time to go. They ran to the airplane with bare feet and sea-sprayed clothes, and as the Silver lifted off the sand into the great wide-open sky, they waved to and were waved at by fishermen and kids with pails and shovels and families who were all enjoying a sunshiny summer day at the beach. On their last day, Ryan left work early, and he and Claudia prepared what became their favorite dinner, pancakes and ice cream. Ryan set the table with his special occasion blue glass plates and Halloween skull paper napkins. Claudia felt just like Alice in Wonderland because she, a tiny girl at a very tall boy's table, needed to sit on 2 dictionaries and some pillows to reach her plate. She didn't mind that her feet didn't touch the ground, though, as it all felt rather fairy tale-ish. And besides, he had saved the last of the real maple syrup for her. After dinner, Ryan and Claudia thought they should make one last farewell flight around the islands. Seattle and the mountains looked particularly enchanting in the almost twilight, but once in the air, they were so tired from all their adventuring, all they really wanted to do was come back home. Sometimes that's how it is. Claudia was sad, though, when they landed because it meant their adventures were coming to an end and she'd have to ride in cars again instead of airplanes, which wasn't quite true, but she didn't know it then. Ryan shut down the Silver's engine, and it made its wonderful mechanical winding down sound. Claudia sniffled, trying to hide tears that had escaped, but it didn't work. Ryan saw them anyway and knew why she was sad. He smiled. "You'll just have to come back," he said, "and we'll find another adventure to have." It was that simple. She felt so much better. After Ryan pushed the plane to its parking spot and settled it in for the night, Claudia hugged the Silver goodbye, thanking it for taking such good care of her in the air. "See you again soon," the Silver whispered to her quietly. And in the morning when she and Ryan hugged goodbye, Claudia remembers thinking that he smelled like sunshine and pillows and wonderful old airplanes. The end. It is an honor to be here because I taught my very first photography class down in the basement back in like 1999 and took classes with Denise Romecki and used to see every show here. And I always thought what a dream it would be to have my own show here. So I'm just so happy to be here, and thank you so much for coming today. It means a lot to me. So as I was talking with Ellen before the show, she thought I should answer the question that everyone seems to ask when they read the story, and that is this man my soulmate? And the answer is no. He was my soulmate for these 2 weeks and some months before then when we were writing. But what wound up happening was I came home and wanted to get my pilot's license so that I could keep flying planes. And when I went to go look for a place to learn how to fly that would actually teach you in a vintage airplane like his, no airports really do that, but except for one at the time, and that was out in Marysville. And when I went to go ask them about taking lessons, this man happened to land in his really cool old looking Warbird, and he came up to me and said, "Can I help you, miss?" And I was like, "Yes, I want to learn how to fly." And this man turned out to be my flight instructor and my husband a few years later. So I credit this experience with helping me find my true soulmate. So that hopefully answers your question and everyone else's. So many people ask. I know. It does sound like a love story. And to me, the experience was a love story. Just, you never think you're gonna have an adventure like this. And part of how it happened was I have Ryan's brother was my friend in Vermont. I didn't really know Ryan at all. And when I went to visit his brother, my friend Ethan, I saw this picture of Ryan with his brand new airplane hanging on Ethan's fridge. And I said, "Is that your brother?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you think he'd ever give me a ride in that?" And so he gave me his email address, and that's how we became friends. And we actually wrote real letters. And I sort of invited myself over, which I guess was the first act of persistence, right? If you want something to happen, ask, because more people than not are willing to help your dream come true. Anyway, so I do have my pilot's license. I did meet my wonderful husband, and what I wanted to talk about was actually the story of how this book became more than a book, I guess, because it started out as a thank you note. But before that, do you have any questions about the story that you want me to answer before I talk? Or do you want to just save them till the end? That's okay too. Okay.
Comments here?
Yes.
Excuse me, this is the book, right?
Yes, and the original book is in that case, and then the second edition of the book is in that case, and then I wanted to make a version to share with more people, so I turned it into an exhibit, which is what I'm going to talk about how that came to be. Okay.
What type of a plane did you learn to fly in?
I learned to fly in a Champ, which still exists, and we still have up at the Marysville Airport. And the reason why in the story I say all her favorite planes would have stars on them, the Champ also has the Army Air Corps star on it. And my husband's plane is a Nanchang CJ-6, which is a Chinese military trainer, and that has the red Soviet star on it.
Do you now fly around?
Mostly I fly with my husband because I don't know, I like sharing things with other people like this. So when I fly, I usually fly with him, we fly together. But in theory, yes, I can still fly by myself. Since then, I've gotten a horse, which has really become my love in the way that, I don't know. You know how sometimes you have a hobby or something you love, but it only lasts for a time, and then you're drawn to something else. That's sort of what happened.
But you love the motion.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and going places and seeing new things, and sharing that with other people.
I don't want you to forget that you were going to share with us persistence.
Yes, here we go. Okay, so by now you've figured out that I'm the person in that story. Yes, it's a true story. And when I got back from this big adventure, I wanted to send Ryan a thank you gift of some sort, and I thought maybe I'd just print 4x6 pictures of photos I took on the trip, but somehow that didn't seem special enough. So I thought I'd much rather make something. I thought maybe I could put a little book together, that would be so much more personal. But then things just kind of snowballed from there. And I thought, what images should I include? Then I started thinking about how to lay it out. That was my first sort of doodle about what I wanted this book to look like. I realized pretty quickly that this wasn't going to be a small project, and I wanted to do it right. So I went to the library and I got a bunch of books on how to make books, and I taught myself how to bookbind. After I'd printed all the pages and sewed up the block, I thought I'd write some captions underneath the pictures. But as I was drafting them, what wound up coming out was this story. It kind of came out as a fairy tale because that's what it felt like to me. And at this point, since I didn't want to reprint everything to include text, I decided to write it out by hand. And the photo paper didn't have lines and wasn't erasable, and I thought I did a really good job. That was really nerve-wracking because I couldn't just unbind the book.
Where did you learn to print like that?
I have kept a journal since I was 10 years old, and so it's just lots of practice. But my father was an architect, and I think I get some of his handwriting gifts from him.
Beautiful.
Thanks. I added special touches where I could. For example, I used Seattle aeronautical charts as end papers. I chose book cloth, the colors of Ryan's plane for the covers. I hand tore the edges. I also asked Ryan to write the title using the pen, ink, and paper that he used to use for our letters. And he said, "What is this for?" And I didn't want to give away the surprise, so I said, "I can't tell you, it's a surprise." I made another copy for myself, which is here, and though it wasn't my original intention to share the book with others, I realized that I wanted to. But how do you bring a single handmade book to a bigger audience? People who saw it said that I should publish it, but no one had any practical suggestions for how to go about doing that. Along the way, I received lots of advice like this. Yes?
I'm a young writer. I've been writing ever since I've been in school from very tiny. I always was scared to write my emotions up because people would think I was just bad, different, all the negative words in the book. But as soon as I learned to write, I used to keep a journal. I noticed it helped me with my mood. But the thing is, how do you encourage somebody like myself that's autistic to express myself freely in writing and to not get and so scared. How do you overcome that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Are you talking about just writing for yourself? Or are you talking about sharing that?
I want to share about my life in books someday and for it to be published, because I don't like keep my diary secret anymore, because I don't want to die with regrets, and I feel like the writing test
Okay.
is in writing. And then I wanted to write this. I keep calling it my comic book. I get writer's block ever since I was 7 on it, but I can do multiple cartooning voices to the characters. And I want to hire my friends so we can make it into a TV show of this comic strip and messy papers of all these characters I've drawn, about 150 characters.
So you've got big plans.
Yes,
Yeah.
I want to be organized like you.
Let me get into how I did that. I've got an idea for you that might be something you'd be interested in. Okay, I'll come to that. So a lot of people, when you have a big project, probably like yours, are going to give you lots of advice, right? People said, "Oh, you should publish that," but no one was helping me get that published. And people give you advice, and it usually means that they're interested and that they care, which is a good thing. But when I get kind of stuck or stumped about something, I tend to latch on to other people's perspectives. And sometimes that reaches a point where I lose my own original vision. So over the course of this project, I've had to learn to be more discerning about what people tell me they think I should do.
What would be an example of that?
Well, you should publish. I don't think this was meant to be a published book in the traditional sense. So that said, if I had only listened to me, this book would just be sitting around collecting dust on my shelf, because a lot of time had gone by and it had been almost a decade since the adventure happened and I kind of moved on. It wasn't until I shared my book with friends that I made at a photography workshop that I got excited about it again. I can't thank these people enough for their encouragement and support to keep it going. They reminded me that the story is timeless, and it didn't matter if years had passed from the experience to putting it out there in a different way. So I went back to the drawing board, and I thought, well, how can I share this story with others? And what I did was, and this is what might be a good idea for you, I made a little condensed version, like a paperback, a zine, really, to sell on my website, which was a project in and of itself. There it is. Because it was a horizontal format and I had to squish it down to way fewer pages. I made a mailing label for it, and I sold some, but I didn't sell much, and the rest of them went into my closet into a box, and there were 200 and some odd copies of this thing taking up space into my closet, and it made me feel bad. So I thought that was a stupid idea, right? How judgy though, right? Just because something fails or isn't successful the way you think it's going to want it to be, I don't know. And then life happened, right? Which is what it does. I was helping my brother take care of our elderly parents who wound up passing within months of each other. Then my brother and I had to go through a lifetime of memories and possessions as we sold our family home, and I forgot about my project entirely for a while. Then somewhere in the middle of all of this, I applied for and won an Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award for the book and the zine. And this little miracle got me fired up about it again, because that's what little miracles do, right? Then I thought this might finally happen, publishing, because my photography mentor had bumped into the creative director of Chronicle Books at a conference, and she said to the guy, "You should take a look at this," and she pulled up my website and showed him my book scans, and the guy said, "Send that to me." So I scrambled. I learned how to write a book proposal. My mentor had my book at her apartment, and so she packed everything up, and off it went to San Francisco. And I waited. Summer came and went. I got married to my flight instructor. I finally got up the courage to email Chronicle to ask what was happening. They thought it was a great project, but said they couldn't really see a place for it in their catalog. And that crushed me again. Like, this was Chronicle, the king of arty yet mainstream books. And if they didn't want to publish it, what chance did it have? So it went back on my shelf, and maybe it was really just time to move on. There it is, next to the left of the Tempest. Yes.
How much is the book if I want a copy?
The little zines are for sale in the gift shop for $25.
Mom, because she loves stories that sound like
Aw.
fairy tales.
Oh, thank you.
Remind me of her little.
Thanks. So I had to take a step back and ask myself, what's best for the work? Right? People always tell you not to give up and to keep sending out your stuff, and I agree. One rejection shouldn't send you running for the hills, and there are 1,000 reasons why your work might not have been a good fit for whatever it is you've submitted to. I couldn't help asking myself, though, why am I still working on this? You know, is it just because it's what I've always been doing, or because it's what I think I'm supposed to be doing, or because someone else said it was what I should be doing? And I realized I kept trying to make the book fit my idea of success without asking what's best for the work. At another photo workshop I attended, a fellow classmate made the comment that her project was really a first pancake. You know, that sort of first test that doesn't quite turn out exactly right, but you learn a lot from that. And that pretty much summed up how I felt about my book. I realized I actually felt grateful that Chronicle hadn't taken it because it wasn't ready to go out into the world as is. It had been a gift from my friend. Words didn't always match the photos. Some parts were personal and not really essential to the story. It needed editing and maybe even a different format. But what could that look like? You know, what if maybe I could make a new edition of the book, or frame pages so that it can become an exhibition, give readings with a slideshow, be an artist in residence, partner with the art community and centers to offer workshops, be an artist in the schools, reach out to the aviation community. It felt like a whole world of possibilities opened that I hadn't even thought of when I was so focused on what I thought was the only viable end goal, publishing.
Let's take a moment to see if anybody can relate to that experience, that first pancake. Look at the hands going up. Wow. Anybody want to share that story?
I have a personal story of how I thought I'd never have a boyfriend. Guess what? Now I'm about to be engaged this Christmas.
Well, congratulations.
Hey, wonderful.
Congratulations.
There's so many boys who are so annoying. And someone comes up to me after being my best friend for 4 years and is like, you know what? I told him about the Dairy Queen, I think you're funny. And I love your humor. And he goes, do you love me? And I just went, mwah!
That's a great reason to love someone. That's the best reason to love someone, I think.
It's not really mature because I'm on the spectrum.
No, that's why I love my husband so much, because he makes me laugh like no one else does. So I get it.
Anybody else want to share that first pancake story? Oh, you had so many hands up when you related to it. But to tell the story is... All right. Okay, good. Here, yeah, take this microphone.
On the spot. Now it becomes like a historical moment, but I've got an idea for a storyline I've had for, I got to come up here too. Wow, okay, thanks. Storyline for, I thought graphic novel, I thought comic book at first. And this is no lie. I've had this idea for probably about 50 years. My son, my youngest son, got tired of hearing about it because he's now a college professor. He teaches, he's taught creative writing for 20 years, and he won't even listen to my thoughts because he's already kind of tried to guide me. And, Dad, you're not listening to me. I've got the experience. I'm like, son, wait a minute. I've done some things you told me to do. I've written my whole story in a sentence. I've written in a paragraph form, and I've done a page. But he wants to see results because I've told this thing to him from him being 7 or 8 years old when he could understand what I was saying to when he got tired of hearing it about when he was about 20 years old and he went to college and he's, studying these ideas. And so I guess I'm just saying that I was drawn to this when I first saw some of what appeared to be a book. I didn't see this at first. I had to ask Helen, was that a book? But I saw these pages split open. I thought, this is what I want to do. I mean, I'm an artist. I draw. I don't take a lot of pictures, but I want to share my story with art. And this is ideal. So this is very encouraging for me, even though you've done it a lot quicker than I have. I mean,
I'm sure someone else has come up with this idea.
well, and you've studied how to make a book. That's cool. And my son, he's got a book called We the Dead. He took him 10 years to write it, but I've read most of it, and it's pretty cool to say that. He's got a book written. So I'm trying to compete with him a little bit and with myself. The goal I set literally 40, 50 years ago, So if I can follow in your footsteps, so to speak, and get something accomplished, I'll feel good. So anybody's got these ideas about failure and not getting it done and so forth, living proof that it doesn't have to be always a failure. It can just be another step to getting to what you want to do.
May I suggest a first step? Take little scraps of paper, fold them up, make a little book, and just doodle it out in pencil. That's your very, very, very first draft.
Thank you.
Keep in touch.
Thank you. Yes, bravo. We'll have father and son for a Conversations and Coffee sometime. How about it? Have father and son for a Conversations and Coffee sometime.
Vermont, but I'll work on it.
Yeah, we'll fly in here, right? We have a pilot right here.
So, let me see. Let me get back to where I was. So, what I wound up doing was putting a reading together. And I gave my first reading at Snow College out in Utah. This was my very first audience. I asked them to sit and pose for this picture that I took from the podium. It made me realize that there are a lot of different ways to get your story out there. Then I visited a friend in upstate New York for a week. This is me deciding to work on a new edition of the book. So I kind of created my own artist residency on my friend's dining room table. I printed out text and images. Then I stared at my pages of words and images for an hour. I wondered where to start. I thought, is the story too long? What should I cut out? What should I keep? Do I stay true to the facts of the story or the spirit of the story? I cut up my papers. Do I lay it out as it looked in the original book and then edit? Do I just start from scratch? It felt like putting a puzzle together. When I finished, though, I had spent a wonderful week with a dear friend. I finished the layout of the new book, and I knew I needed to go back to Seattle to take some of the photos of places I hadn't photographed the first time. So the chapter about our visit to Hoquiam, which was where the piers came out of the fog, I had gone on that whole walk without my camera, and all I had was my written description. The book, I felt, needed photos to go with that text, so I emailed Ryan, and we planned a trip back to the bay at low tide. It wasn't as foggy as it was the first time, so I took pictures anyway, and I actually rewrote that part of the story to match the new photos. And I wrestled with this a little bit, because I felt, would it be lying to an audience if it wasn't exactly what happened? It's such a weird thing to think about. But in the end, I was like, nope, I'm the artist and I can do what I want. So that's what I did. And at the end, I can even open the cases if you want to see both books to see the difference. So the first edition of the book is case-bound. Signatures are sewn together and glue helps adhere the signatures to the spine. But the glue had seeped into the gap between the signatures and lifted off parts of the images that had been printed across this gap. So I knew I wanted to create a version of the book without glue. And so I paid a visit to Cloverleaf Studios in Austin, Texas. That was where Jace Graff taught me how to construct the book using what's called exposed tape binding. And like this fun little end result was that the spine now looked like the rudder of Ryan's airplane. It's red and white. So at the same time, I was mulling over how to create an edition that could be viewed in a gallery setting. I thought about printing individual pages to frame for display, but that didn't feel right. Because just a single sheet of paper doesn't feel like a book. It feels flat, and it looks flat. So I thought, what about sewing? That was the exhibition. I thought, what about sewing deconstructed signatures to mounting boards and then putting them in shadow box frames so they'd be more three-dimensional? The exhibition made its debut in Springfield just before COVID hit, but then went back into its boxes and pretty much sat there for the last 4 years while life went on. I keep going back and forth between loving this project and being disappointed by what I perceive as its lack of momentum and success. Right, there's that word again. But really, when I think about it, it hasn't had much of a chance to get out there. COVID kind of shut things down, and museums and centers are on at least a year-long process, if not more, to get your work there. So sometimes I just wanted to be done with it and not think about it anymore. But having this show and seeing it up on walls again makes me realize how much I do love it. My relationship with this project, I realize, is very much like a long-term relationship with anything else, right? All kinds of excitement and big dreams and expectations in the beginning, but then it kind of settles into something beautiful and more real over time without all the expectations. My definition of success has changed too, thank goodness. Now it's just, are people happy when they see the show? Does it inspire? Then it's successful. Brian, that's you. These kids were at my opening in Springfield. They had a little table where kids could make their own books out of scraps of maps and things like that. And this will never happen again. This kid came up to me and said, "Can you sign my book?" And I was like, "Sure, okay." And so I signed it, and he ran back to his mom and said, "Mom, I got an autograph from a real artist." And I thought, how life-affirming. No one's gonna say that to you ever again. And I was just so magical. So to me, that's success. And that is what this project is about. A friend of mine came to the opening here and said that she could see me being 90 years old and still showing this exhibit because it feels so timeless. And my first thought was, yikes, I don't want this to be my entire life's work, right? Or the only thing I do. But then I stopped myself because I know it's not gonna be the only thing I ever do. And it doesn't need to define who I am. And when I think about it really, how beautiful is it to have a relationship with a project, a person, with anything that spans decades, or even better, a lifetime?
Also known as Forever Creepy in my guy.
So that's kind of my talk.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yes, Rita.
So I know this started out as a thank you.
Yeah.
So did you end up mailing this book?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
And
It got FedExed. Yeah, it wound up there.
You want to repeat that so we can be sure we hear your
Oh,
question?
she asked if this started out as a thank you, so was it sent to my friend? And yes, it was, and it was well received. He did enjoy it. And but what's interesting was going back the second time, what would have been 7 years later, maybe. The magic was just gone, right? As things like life is like that too. You have this wonderful time, but it's like condensed into one set of moments, or the planets align just for that time, and then you go back again, and it's just not the same. Like, I don't know. Yes.
Have you talked to a lot of the pilots that flies, because they got tons of stories?
Oh yeah, there's a plethora of flying stories books, by pilots, and I didn't want this to be in the same category, which is part of the why I turned it into an exhibit instead of just a book. Yes.
My brother, he flies a Luscombe, and you got the stick, and a couple times he took the doors off and yanked it out, and it's always interesting to fly with no doors.
It's such a beautiful experience. I thought I'd be nervous, but I wasn't. So, yes.
Your photography is stunning. Is this just your natural beginnings of photography? Or?
She asked if the question
You wanna
was
repeat
if
that so everybody hears it.
Yeah, she asked if the photography, if this was my beginnings in photography, and it wasn't. I worked primarily in black and white, and film before digital cameras came around at all. I had a dark room in my closet, all of that, and my first work was primarily black and white, which I kind of miss. And ever since digital kind of took over, I've had kind of a war with myself about how I want to print my work, because I don't know if I want to still print in the darkroom anymore, but at the same time, I don't like just prints rolling out of your Epson. It doesn't seem as crafted. So consequently, I haven't printed anything like in years. So this was a project that got out because of the kind of project it was, that it was a book.
How old were you when you realized you loved to fly a plane?
Oh, this was it.
That was it?
This was it. Well, no, actually, that's not true. So I was 4, and we had been living in Europe at the time, and we were coming to America to visit family, and this was back in the day when you could still go visit the cockpit of a plane in flight. And so we were on the Pan Am 747, and my dad took me up to the front of the plane, and I got to sit on the pilot's lap and steer. And I remember looking out that window thinking, you see everything. And that's actually, I think, what inspired me to
You were 4.
I was 4.
Oh.
Yeah, I was 4.
Is it any wonder that you love? And did you actually then become a pilot?
Yes, after this story, after I found a place to learn how to fly, I did get my pilot's license in 2012.
Oh.
So I soloed in a Champ. I went specifically to learn how to fly a tailwheel, so there's 2 different kinds of planes. There's planes with their third wheel in the front, which is called a nose wheel, and they're typically more stable. And there's ones like Ryan's plane, which has a wheel in the back, which makes them great for landing on like grass and like the bush in Alaska, but they're tricky to land. And so it's a little like learning how to drive a stick shift versus an automatic, right? So I was like, I know how to drive a stick shift, so I wanted to learn how to fly a tailwheel. And so, yeah, that I was lucky to be able to learn in a tailwheel because it made flying anything else like really easy.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes.
Is your husband a member of the Red Star Flyers group?
Red Star Pilots, yeah. Yeah, definitely give us your information.
Well, I know about him because I go up to Oshkosh every year for the big air show, and one of my former coworkers at Piedmont Airlines and U.S. Air is one of the photographers that flies around with the Red Star Flyers named Jay Selman. I don't know whether he knows Jay or not.
Okay, yeah, I don't. He probably does. I don't personally. We're actually putting a new engine in my husband's plane, so it's sadly down at the moment, but we're hoping to get it up and running again this summer.
Anyone have to go through a moment to love to fly?
Oh, that's a good question.
Huh?
Go up the handlebars on a swing and I thought I could. And then my mom got so upset because I screamed when I fell on my left wrist and she thought I could go back to school for years. And I was like, Mom, get over it. That's not the one that's preventing me going back to school. It's you. And I told her over and over and I screamed, I'm right-handed. I'm okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you make mistakes, things that are big. Try being on the spectrum.
Yeah. My husband jumped off a dresser when he was a little kid because he thought he could fly out the window. So, yeah, I think, they're just folks with that spirit in them, I think.
Oh. Claudia Retter, wasn't you
Alan,
took
thank
us?
you.
Yes, what a great flight and adventure. And with the lesson of persistence, staying with it. We thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Yes, yes.